And I've got Stephanie Davis right here. She is the director from the Wells County Public Library, and she's here to tell you all about their experience going Deweyless. So I'll be watching the chat box today, and so if you have questions, just type them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get them all answered. She can also, if you think about questions later, just send it to Stephanie, and she'll answer them. So has lots to say and lots of pictures in this presentation. So enjoy finding out about Deweyless. Here's Stephanie.
Thanks, Paula. I just want to tell you first that I have been at the Wells County Public Library for, I'm in my 31st year. And I started working in libraries when we were in a big time of change. Computers were coming on, and we were all automating. And it was a continuous time of change from that point forward. My staff would probably tell you that I'm a change agent. And some of them would probably tell you I'm too much of one. But anyway, this is just one of the many changes that we've made over the years. And it's not something that we did overnight, though. So I want you to be aware of that. One must remember that Dewey was developed when librarians were finding the books, when there was closed shelves. Those were the days when none of the public were able to get their own books. Librarians just had to know about Dewey. Every book had a Dewey number, and it was probably not long after the stacks were open that we pulled fiction out and started putting it on shelves alphabetical by title. So it's not something new, it's just something that we're doing more of these days. From my readings on Dewey, he appeared to be a very progressive man. He was all about changing spelling to the strict phonetic spelling. So I think that if Dewey were alive today, he would probably be all for what we're doing, because I think he would think that now is the time to do something different. We started thinking about this process a long time ago. We were part of a continuous improvement team back in 2002, and we still meet with this team on a quarterly basis even till today, and we're always talking about things we can do to make our library better. And when things started coming on the scene about going Deweyless, we started watching that, and we started reading those articles in the LJ. The first library that we remember talking about as a staff was in 2007 when Maricopa changed their system to BISAC. We were watching that with very much curiosity. And then a couple years later, in 2009, Rangeview was the first library that completely changed their entire library system, because Maricopa just did it for a branch. And then we watched a little longer, and people were talking about the pros and the cons, and some people were saying, we just can't go completely Deweyless. So then libraries started popping up, like Darien Library, with a mashup system, they called it. They divided their books into 8 broad categories, but within those categories, which they called glades, they shelved them according to Dewey. So they had sort of a system going on where they did a little bit of BISAC and a little bit of Dewey. We loved the idea. There were so many positives about this. It was great for browsing, it was less intimidating to the patron, and it was helpful. But there were a lot of negatives that loomed large for us. It was a huge investment of time and work. The change was threatening, and the outcome was still a little bit unknown. So we had just remodeled our building in 2006, and we moved all of our collections. And the patrons, they don't like it when you move collections, so we couldn't even possibly think about moving them again so soon. So we opted for doing something with signage. So we spent the summer and fall of 2010 taking on some of those ideas about grouping material, and we started creating signage for our patrons. So they kind of to interpret Dewey. We put signs in our aisles, and we labeled every single shelf in our nonfiction collection with a subject that was on that shelf. So we were helping patrons by using words to find their material if they were browsing the shelves. We also put a lot of see also signs that you see there on our shelves telling you where else in Dewey that you can find books on collectibles, where else you can find all the other subjects that were in 2 or 3 or 4 different places. And we spent a lot of time with wonderful display, end caps, telling patrons, trying to pull together books on a subject out of our stack so patrons could find them more easily. Our efforts were noted and very much appreciated. Patrons loved the signage, and we received many comments about how wonderful the labels were on the shelves. And we were motivated then to look for more ways to make our material more accessible. We kind of got a little bit delayed because in 2012, our focus became on 2 other projects that we were doing. We were doing an expansion remodel of our Ossian branch, and we were developing our strategic plan for 13 through 17. During the process of doing our plan, we had the opportunity, though, to hear firsthand from many of our patrons, and they were excited about the fact that we were trying to make our collection more accessible, easier to use, and promoting the collections that were of interest to them. So, in 2010, my cataloger had the opportunity to attend a session at Cersei Dynex, and it was put on by the Delta Township District in Michigan, and they had done a mashup of their collection, and they were talking about it at the conference, and my cataloger got all excited about it again, and she came home and she was telling us, she said, you know, we don't have to give up Dewey completely if we don't want to. They've done a mashup, and it works really well for them, and she says, I just think it's the next step. And so we started talking about it. In fact, we talked about it every single month at our department head meeting, talked about the pluses and the minuses, but not everybody was on board, and we thought, can we do it? Is it too much work? What happens if we do it and people don't like it? So we had all these questions. So I decided finally in 2013 that it was time to stop talking about it and just make a decision about whether we were going to proceed or not. So I called up the Kent District Public Library in Michigan and asked if we could come visit because they had just finished doing a whole system-wide conversion to BISAC, to a word-based classification system. They have 18 branches, and they had completely done their entire system, and it was within a couple hours of us. So I thought, we can go look and see how it is. So we went to visit one day. I took all my department heads, and we went to Michigan, and we visited 2 other branches. One was the size of our main branch, and one was the size of our Ossian branch. And so we went and visited, we talked to the staff, we saw all the books actually on the shelf, we asked all of our questions. The staff were very kind, and they gave us a whole bunch of information about how they started, the whys and the wherefores, the mistakes they made, and advice on how we should proceed if we wanted to. So we came home all inspired. We were totally motivated, and we were all positive about it. Everybody in the car was for it, and they weren't going forward. When we were heading up there, I think most of us thought we're just going to find out that we're not going to do it. But that wasn't the case. We all came home inspired to do it. So before we decided to make the final decision, I knew that I had to get everyone on board. Everyone, from that library trustees to the entire staff, and then our community. So I felt we needed to get some buy-in, so I spent the next 2 months talking about going Dewey-free with my library board. We talked about the pros and the cons, and pretty much they were for it. I think they had faith that if we made this decision that it was going to be the right one, and they went back and they talked to their constituents. A lot of them work in the schools, so they were talking to the schools about it, and I got a lot of positive feedback. And in September of that year, we had a staff in service, and I talked to the entire staff about it. Those of us that visited Kent reported on what we saw, the positives, the negatives, and everything that we learned. And I think the staff started to get on board with it. They saw how this might make things a lot easier. So in November, the department heads thought that we felt we had enough buy-in to move ahead, and that decision was supported by my board at the November meeting. So we began. One of the things that we learned from going to the Kent District Public Library was that we felt certain that we wanted to go with an all-word-based system, that we felt that that's what they had, and we saw it and we thought, why would we want to do both? Why would we want to keep Dewey if we're really going to go through this work of changing our collection to word-based? So we decided that if we're going to do it, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to all words. We also decided that we were going to develop our own classification system, because one of the things that Kent told us was that the beauty of the system is that you can conform that system to your collection. You didn't have to have categories that you didn't really have represented in your collection, and if you had a lot of a particular category, you could break that down even further. So the beauty was that if you're going to develop your own classification system, that you can make it represent the collection that you have. And if something changes down the road, well, then you can just change the classification. So I felt this was a very important decision for a lot of reasons, because taking the time to decide and define your own system gave us the opportunity to learn about our collection and to buy into the system. It's difficult to explain a system to someone if you don't really understand the reasoning and rationale behind it. Taking this time resulted in less changes later. Now notice I didn't say that it eliminated changes. There will always be changes that need to be made, but it did make them a lot fewer. I am certain that we kept them down to a reasonable minimum. Maricopa County Public Library graciously decided to share their copy of their scope notes with us, and that's what you see over there in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's just an Excel spreadsheet that they made listing all their categories, how they abbreviated the category name if they had to, and what it defined what was in that category, what was in it and maybe what wasn't in it. And this is a document that we keep changing as we go along because we keep adding to it. It's a very versatile document that we keep updating. And it's important because if you have more than one cataloger like we do, everybody has to be on the same page. And in future, when those catalogers are gone that we're investing in this system, the new ones are going to need to know what they were thinking and where they're going to put books. So we're always updating this. Determining our framework was a bit of trial and error. We started out wanting to create way too many categories. We constantly had to remind ourselves that the goal was to make the system more accessible and not as complicated as Dewey. We had to refrain from creating unnecessary subcategories. And we needed not to be concerned about keeping our category levels all the same. For instance, if our collection had a lot of something, we would want to pull that out and make that a major category. For instance, in the children's room, we made dinosaurs a major category because they have a bazillion dinosaur books of all kinds. But in the adult collection, we didn't. So we were always trying to think about those things, what we have a lot of, what's important to our patrons to be able to find easily. We also decided that our categories had to be strictly alphabetical. I know some libraries, they try to group their categories to by subject and try to keep like all the nature things together, all the animal things together. But one of the things that Kent told us was that it's really difficult for your patrons to learn where your material are if there's not some scheme. So just like Dewey was in number order, our system had to be alphabetical for patrons to be able to easily find what they're looking for. So labeling, believe it or not, even though that's something that we did toward the end of the process, is something we really had to think of right in the beginning, because the label determines a lot of things. And we couldn't start thinking about classification systems if we didn't know what our label was going to ultimately look like. We had to think about the size of our label, the font we were going to use so that it was easily readable. We decided right off the bat that we were going to left justify everything on the label, and we were going to line that label up with the left edge of the spine so you could see and start reading all the words from a glance. We had to determine how many characters we could get on the line of a label. For the most part, it's 10 for the labels that we use. And we also had to decide how many lines we could get on the label. Whether or not we were going to capitalize or put them in lowercase. And what about our call number limit for our ILS system? We had to check that out. In our case, it's 40 characters. We also had to remember as we did the process that we had to change our classification system in our computer. We didn't think about that right in the beginning, and sometimes the first books we did were still left as Dewey. We had to change that to as is. So if you're going to do this, remember that right off the bat, that you have to change your classification scheme. We went with larger labels. We purchased them from Demco, and we got 1.5 by 1 inch labels in regular and foil. The foil labels were for the skinny children's books. Because when you wrap the label around to the front of the book, which we decided to do, those skinny books, sometimes the labels would pop up. So we used the foil labels on those. We also purchased ultra aggressive label protectors from Demco. You'll need those for those skinny books too. We learned the hard way. So what we decided was that we were going to end up with the top line of our label being our department or the location of the material. So for adult, it was a default, so there's nothing on the top of the adult labels. But for the teen books, they were going to say teen at the top. The kids' books were going to say kids, and the Indiana room was going to say Indiana room, and so forth down the line. Then we were going to have 3 categories. We were going to have a major category and at the most, 2 subcategories. And we decided so that we could differentiate that pretty easily from the cutter, we were going to capitalize all the categories. The cutter would be the 4th or 5th line, depending, and it was going to be just in lowercase, and the author was going to be the default, but not always, as you'll see later on. And then we had room on our labels for a 6th line if we needed it. Sometimes in the adult collection, in the nonfiction, we will put the date or the volume number on that last line, and that's mainly for us, not so much for the patron, but for us. So we had to decide all this really before we got started, because if we were going to come up with words that were way too long for our labels and that we couldn't really abbreviate very easily, we might want to think about a different word. Or we had to know exactly how many categories and subcategories we could have. We also decided right off the bat that this was our shelving rule. We were going to shelve by the label and then by the title. So whatever was on the label was how the book was going to be shelved. And then after that, by the title. So in nonfiction, this meant that if we might have more than one author named Macmillan, they might be mixed up, because after we shelved by the label, we were going to shelve by the title. But that doesn't happen very often in nonfiction, and we didn't think it was going to be a problem. Because the goal was we wanted patrons to be able to look at the card catalog, get the call number, and go to the shelf and find their books. We didn't want them to have to write down a bunch of stuff like the author's first name or any other tedious information. Just know what the call number is, and they would be able to find their book. This also made it very easy for the shelvers. No longer did they have to remember a bunch of different shelving rules. They just shelved the book by what was ever on the label. So knowing this going on helped us make some decisions about the kinds of words we used, or how long they were, or maybe what they started with even. So these decisions, even though we didn't get to the label till later on, really made a big difference in how we decided our categories. Our goal, remember, was to keep it easy for the patron. This is what our card catalog ended up looking like. We had 40 characters to work with, and sometimes we use them all, but most of the time not. So you can see I did a search here in my card catalog for animals, and so this is what the result is. So we have some books that say kids, animals, and then the cutter. We have other books that use 2, which is the maximum number of subcategories. That second one is kids, animals, habitats, wetland, and then the cutter. So where did we begin? We began with the adult nonfiction. We started in the summer of 2014. That meant that we spent from November until April choosing our categories for our adult nonfiction. It was a long process, but I really felt it was worth it. We had those words up on our staff room wall forever, for 5 months, and we would meet once a week, and there was 8 staff members and myself. It was 8 department heads and myself that worked on deciding what our categories were going to be. We met weekly, and we started with animals, which is our first category, and we worked our way all the way through to wellness, which was our last. Every meeting we had probably lasted 2 or 3 hours because, believe it or not, it's not as easy as it looks to decide what you want your categories to be. And every week we would spend some time in the shelves of the books that we knew we were going to be talking about the next week, so we'd have some idea of what topics we wanted to use, and we would come together and just work it all out. Sometimes we'd go through one category at a meeting, sometimes it would be 4 or 5, depending on. And we would always start the meeting by going back and looking what we'd already done, because sometimes we would want to tweak it or change a little bit of something to what we've already decided before we moved forward. So it was a steady process. But like I said, I think it really benefited us because we really felt secure in the decisions that we made. We felt like everybody was on board and all the departments were contributing to the decisions. During the time that we were coming up with our categories, we also weeded our collection very heavily. We do a pretty strict weeding schedule anyway at our library, but I didn't want to take the time and the money to relabel books that we were going to be weeding like the next year or even the year after. So we kind of weeded really strong that summer, kind of ahead of the game, so we would not have to withdraw books that we had just recently relabeled. So the big question, probably the biggest question for us, was how were we really going to do this? Once we started changing the books, how were we going to do this? Were we going to be a mess all summer? Was it going to be, where were we going to put the books that we had finished? How were we going to do this? This was a big decision. So one morning, one of my department heads came to work and she said, I thought of it in the shower. I know how we can do this. And I said, well, please share, because we were just trying to figure this out. And she said, I think what we need to do is shift all the books to the back. And so that's what we did. We shifted all of our nonfiction books all the way to the end, as tight as we could possibly get them. And so what that did is it freed up all the shelves in the beginning of our nonfiction collection. And so what we did was the catalogers would go out to the shelves and pull all the animal books that they were going to work on. And then they would recatalog them and they would start putting them back on the shelves in the beginning of the collection. So this meant that all summer our books were going to be moving in the adult nonfiction. So this was going to be a problem. So we talked about this too, and this is what we decided. We thought, first of all, we made a conscious decision to start with our adult nonfiction. And the reason for this is because anything that I've read about negative about changing your classification system is that people will come up to you and they say, oh, you're just dumbing down your library. And so I wanted to beat that right off at the beginning. And I thought, I don't want to start with the children's room and have people say later on when we change the adult collection that, oh, you're just moving stuff up from the children's room. You know, you're just dumbing down the collection. So I wanted to make a statement by starting with the adult collection. I wanted to tell people that this is something we truly believed was going to be helpful to our library, and we're starting with the adults. As it happened, it was a good thing that I decided to do this because we were ready to start in the summer, and that would have been an awful time to do the children's collection. So we were starting with the adult collection. Secondly, I told my staff that, you know, this is going to be a mess all summer, and people are going to need your help in finding their books, because if we do it this way, if we're always shifting books to the front and we're cataloging new books and putting them in the, shifting our old books to the back and putting our new books to the front, we're constantly going to be moving these books around, so they're going to need help. So we decided we're going to take advantage of this and we're going to spend time one-on-one with our patrons. So I had meetings with all the staff members before we started, And we talked about what we were doing, how we were going to do it, and I gave them all talking points to talk to the staff member or to the patrons about as they were helping them find their books. I said, we're going to take advantage of this. When patrons come in and they want a book, we're going to take the time to walk them to the stack, show them where their book is, and tell them about what we're doing and why their books are moving. This was wonderful. I think this is what really made the process work, because we did spend a lot of time talking about it, and patrons got to be in on the change and watch it develop. So what we did was, as we shifted the books to the back, we put we took all of our signage down and we put temporary signs up letting patrons know what was down each aisle. And then as the new books came out at the beginning of the shelving unit, we put the new signage up showing the patrons what was there. So for most of the summer, we had both classifications going on, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. In the fall of 2014, which is just that summer, we completed the adult nonfiction collection. We probably handled about 30,000 books that summer, changing them over to the new system. We gave the cataloging staff the ability to make some changes to our classification systems if they felt it was needed as they actually saw the books. It was one of the things that my cataloger was really insistent upon. She wanted to actually see the books as she was changing them over. The larger systems that we had looked at that had gone Deweyless, most of them had actually converted their collection via reports. And there were mistakes. I mean, there's going to be mistakes. But we're a smaller library. We're all on, our nonfiction collection was all on one floor with the cataloging department. It was easy to go out, roll out carts, load them up, and take them back to the tech services and sort them all out and decide what was going to go in each category and then start changing the labels. And they chose to do it that way, and it worked out really well. We probably had even fewer mistakes because of that. So that's how it worked. And everybody pitched in all summer and helped. As soon as the tech services was done with a cart of books, people were helping relabel them, actually put the labels on. And two of us, one of my department heads and myself, we were the responsible parties for actually putting the new books onto the shelf, because we wanted to see how they were looking. As we put them up, we could see if there was any mistakes being made on the labels, and if we thought, oh, we made a bad choice about putting a book in a certain spot, we could kind of catch it as we were putting them on.
We have a question. Does every book you own fit into your categories?
Yes, it actually does. This was something that we thought, it was a joke in the library. We thought when we're all done, what we're going to have is we're going to have this whole like half a range of books that we didn't pull for any category, and it's going to be left like the miscellaneous section or something. That was our greatest fear. But as it was, when we were finished, we had every book. Sometimes it was difficult to decide where to put a book, but every book had a place. And that was a surprise to us, too, because we thought for sure that there would be this hodgepodge of stuff left at the end.
We've got maybe Stephen asking a question. We're still waiting for it to come through.
Okay. Yeah, I will go on then. So when we were finished in the fall, we put up new signage. As you can see here, we still did put shelf labels back on the shelves because the patrons loved them so. But this time they actually meant something really important. It was the category and the subcategory of whatever was on that shelf. I also dug out old magazine flippers that we had left over when we downsized our magazine collection, and used those, put them periodically through the nonfiction shelves to display some books face front. I tried to put them where a new category started, so that was helpful too, so patrons would know, oh, this is where the new section starts. We did some word clouds on the ends of our end panels to show patrons what kind of subjects were down each shelf, and they loved those too. After we finished with the adult nonfiction, we moved on to the other nonfiction collections of our library, large print, for instance, you see here, audiobooks, movies. Our nonfiction movies are shelved in our nonfiction collection, so actually those got done while we were doing the nonfiction part. We have been shelving those alongside the books and the nonfiction for a long, long time. Another change that we made was we decided we were going to, even though we had pared down our reference collection considerably over the years, we were going to pare it down even more, and we were going to incorporate a lot of what we decided to keep into our nonfiction collection. So we really don't have much of a reference collection left anymore. It's all pretty much incorporated into our adult nonfiction. And some of the books we decided we still didn't want to loan, because I'm kind of the old school librarian in the fact that I want patrons to find material when they come in. I don't want it to be all checked out. So we did keep some reference material non-loaning, but what we did was we just stuck the library use only sticker on the spine, and then we put a label on the front of the book, and it says that even though this book doesn't check out of our library, you can get some free copies if you see the reference desk. So that worked really nice. And I don't know, I think our reference collection is probably getting used a little bit more now that it's in with all the other books on the same topic, because it wasn't getting much use before.
Marie Brown asked, did you run this by your board?
Sure. Yeah. We had to get a board's approval for this. We did that in November, yes. It wasn't something I just popped on them. We had talked about for quite a while. So we also changed over our Ready reference collection behind the reference desk. Our teen nonfiction collection is not very large, but we do have one. It got changed. And then in September of 2014, we decided we were ready to start on the children's nonfiction collection. We worked on these categories alongside the categories that we were working on with the adults. We did them simultaneously for the most part. A good majority of our categories are the same in the adult collection as they are in the children's collection, but not everything. We did change some of the words we used in the children's collection, and of course they have topics that we don't have in the adult, like dinosaurs and vice versa. So there is a little bit of difference, but for the most part they were the same. The problem is that with the children's books is that they're so skinny. So we were really, that was one of the things that we were concerned about when we decided to go to word-based. But as you can see here from this picture, because we lined up the label on the left end of the spine, you can really see most of the words, even on the skinniest books. So my shelvers tell me it's not hard to shelve. You can pretty much tell what those words are, even though they do wrap around to the front of the book. Another problem is that in the adult collection, since the books are larger, you could have maybe one shelf of books might be just a particular, they all may be the same category and subcategory. But in the children's room, because the books are so skinny, you get a lot more books on a shelf, so you have a lot more categories sitting on one shelf. So that's kind of a struggle. But it went pretty well, I have to say.
Yeah, question is maybe going to come up soon. They wanted to know, how did you catalog some of your Indiana room material?
We're getting to that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. So anyway, so the adult nonfiction went along pretty smoothly because we had most of the work already done, and we made the same kind of decisions. We did, if you're going to make a major change like this and change the labels of your books, I told my staff it was time to make sure that we made all the changes we wanted to make that affect the label, now, not wait until after we were done. So we did change the names for our different departments. Our young adult department became the teen department, and our children's department became the kids department. So we made those changes ahead of time so that they're reflected in our labels. One of the things that really made a big difference is that when we decided we were going to go word-based, we really meant word-based. We decided to do away with all the abbreviations and all the little acronyms that we've used. Before, we never spelled out things. There's always J for the children's department, and it was YA for the young adult, and LP for large print. And we decided if we're going to go to words, we're going to go to words. And we're not going to make patrons guess anymore or know what all the things stand for. So we started spelling everything out. So this made this project affect our entire collection. So as you will see as we go on, it's not just the nonfiction collection any longer. I mean, it affected our entire collection. So you notice all the words are spelled out as best we can. This was the adult and the children's categories. If you're interested, I'd be sure to send you this information. But you can see here that lots of the categories are the same. People ask me in the children's room, what did you do with the fairy tales? Well, that was a big decision. So what we did was we wanted to not spread out. If we're alphabetical and we had a category called fairy tales, and then we had later on another category called mythology and another category called tall tales, they would be separated. So we decided that we would like to keep those all in the general same area. So we decided on tales for the category, and then the subcategories reflected whether they were a fairy tale or mythology or a scary tale or a tall tale. And then sometimes we even used a subcategory to indicate the particular fairy tale, because lots of times we have a lot of Cinderella stories and we get a lot of requests for all the different versions of Cinderella. So we made that a subcategory so those all sit on the shelf together. After the children's nonfiction, we moved on to the Indiana Room collection, or the genealogy, which somebody asked about earlier. This is a collection of, that has its particular emphasis on genealogy. We used as many of our nonfiction categories as were reflected in this collection, but it has some special needs. So we altered this a little bit too. We used those terminology that we could from the adult nonfiction and then created some others, some subcategories that reflected the collection better. We expanded the genealogy. That's a major category in our Indiana Room, and we expanded it to divide up all the kinds of genealogy books that we have. It was funny because my reference librarian who's in charge of the genealogy collection was really, really worried because she thought, I don't see how we're going to make this collection fit into our categories. And I said, it doesn't have to. It can have its own categories. That's the beauty of deciding on your own classification system. So we kept it, as familiar as possible, but we did make changes that made sense for that collection. They love it now, and the genealogists love it now. Okay, I told you it kind of grew, so it grew way past nonfiction for our library. Once we decided that, we were going to be words, it just became an instance where we ended up we're changing our entire collection. We thought it was just going to be nonfiction, but as it turned out, to be consistent and to be true to our philosophy that the label should tell you exactly where the book is and how to find the book, we decided to change all of our collections to word-based, whether or not they were Dewey or not. So the magazine collection got changed. We had already, a couple years ago, started shelving our magazines by the topic, but it was hard to let the patron know what our topics were. So it took them a while to adjust, but so we decided, well, we're changing the labels. We might as well change the labels on the magazine. So we've labeled those to indicate where the magazine, what topic it's under, and where you'll find it on the shelf, and they're all alphabetical. We also started changing our fiction collection. When we started to do this process back in the summer of 2014, we decided then that every new book that came in, we were going to start processing differently. And so we have some of our fiction. Our new fiction has all been relabeled to spell out the word fiction. It's not F-I-C anymore, or F, or whatever people have. We spelled out fiction, and we spelled out the author's last name. So even though we are just now changing our fiction collection, our new fiction had been changed for a long time. So we have the same title across various formats, and the labels look very, very consistent. The only thing that really is different is the location, which is the top line of the label. Music even got on board. We had been, like the magazines, we had been categorizing our music for a while, kind of helter-skelter-wise, just by shelving. We really didn't alter the labels that much, but now we are. The labels are changed, the call numbers are changed to reflect the word-based idea. We came up with music categories to fit our music collection, and there those are. And this has really helped us out a lot in our graphic novel collection and our teen series collection. We used to have our graphic novels had all these stickers all over the spine to indicate what series they belonged in, so people would know where to shelve them and try to keep them in order, in series order. So now we've just incorporated those things into the label. So now X-Men has its a subcategory, so all those X-Men books are all together. Same thing, we have a teen series section in the teen collection, and so now we have teen series and the series name, so those all stay together. So here's just some examples of teen books, again, that maybe are shelved in different locations, but their label and their categories are very similar. After all these books were done, we did start on the children's fiction collections, and this is a big undertaking because, as you all know, we have tons of locations for children's fiction. We have beginning readers, we have picture books, we have toddler books, we have series books, we have all kinds of things. So this was a big undertaking, but I'm proud to say that it's all done now. One of the nice things about it was that we could pull together collections that maybe we want to shelve together but really aren't the same collection. So for instance, holiday. In the children's room we have tons of holiday books, and we like to keep them together because parents like to go to one spot to find the holiday books. They don't really care whether they're fiction or they're nonfiction, or whether they're beginning readers or they're older fiction. They like to find them all together. So we have shelved those all together under kids' holiday books, but then the categories and the subcategories indicate what kind of book it is. So what the holiday is, and also whether it's a picture book, a beginning reader, or whatever. So that's really helped us be able to pull that collection together into one spot and still make sense of it. Beginning readers, they took the opportunity to divide up their beginning readers also, so they have beginning readers and they have beginning chapter readers. So those are indicated here too. So the category and subcategory part of the label has really been helpful to a lot of these collections. We also took the opportunity to pull out some of our picture books and put them into categories. Our children's services are always getting requests for some books like princesses and dinosaurs and new baby books and potty training books and that kind of thing. So they've pulled these out and put them into their own category. So we have kids, picture book, new baby, and then the author's last name.
We had a question about, did you do a similar thing in adult fiction, such as Christian fiction, mysteries together, etc.?
We didn't, but we could have. We haven't shelved our fiction by genre in a long, long time. We made a decision several years ago that we were no longer going to do that because authors were spreading out and writing in cross genres, and then there were cross genres. There was these mystery romances, and it just got so complicated. So we stopped shelving according to genre a long, long time ago. So we didn't do that. But if you do, that would be very easy to do. I mean, that would be perfect.
Yeah, another one. This is back to the probably the kids department, did you get any pushback from schools? They've had some teachers who are upset that the school's doing it this way.
We haven't. We really haven't. Kansas District warned us. They said that the people that will be most against you doing this are the educators. They kind of warned us about that. And so I kind of jumped on that right away because a lot of my board members are teachers. I have 2 teachers and another person that works in the school system on my board. So I really talked about them to them at great length about it. And I really, we talked about it a lot, and I sold them on it, and I think they went back to the schools and kind of helped, them understand, because I think we had one person, one librarian in one of our schools, we have 3 school systems, that was really against it, and but I think we've won her over now. So I do think that, they're the ones that will say, oh, kids should learn Dewey. But the fact is that in our schools, our school systems only have 1 librarian, and most of the schools have a library aide, and so there's not as much library instruction going on, and I think that they're fine not having to worry about, teaching Dewey. I think that's probably a blessing for them, and they're not spending a lot of time doing it anyways, because we're finding a lot of kids have no idea about Dewey. So I think this is helpful, and I think most of the schools are really gravitating toward going Deweyless. Their problem is they don't have time to do the conversion. I think they would do it in a heartbeat if they had the time. But that's what we're hearing anyway. I don't know, it may not be that where you are, but our schools are all on board with it.
We're getting a flurry of questions now.
Okay.
For fiction, but did you sort by the author's first names within the same last name?
For fiction, we are putting the author's last name and the first letter of their first name if we have room for it, so we can keep those all together. That's how we're dealing with that. So it's Smith L and Smith W or whatever. So.
Did your staff ever disagree on what category a book belonged to, and how did you make the final decision?
Oh, yes, we disagreed. That's why we would talk about it a lot and go back and talk about it again, make sure that the decision we made was all right with everyone. Yes, we disagreed a lot, but I think once we got started, after the first few categories, I think we got more on the same page with the idea. Yes, we disagreed a lot. But it was a friendly disagreement, and I think that we just kept going back to the ideas, what word makes the most sense to our patrons? How would they best find the book? How would they best think about this topic? So I think we just kept that in the forefront, thinking like a patron. So.
And another person asked about, do colleges still use Dewey? And someone else said probably they use LC.
LC. Mm-hmm.
But then she also asked, are we hurting children by not teaching Dewey?
Well, they have to learn LC when they go to college anyway. So I don't know that we're making it any worse for them as they go. And I think the thing of it is, I guess the last thing that made us decide that this is what we wanted to do was the fact that all of our school systems now, are issuing the iPads and the devices to their children, and children are becoming very adept at searching. I mean, that's one thing that they can do. They can search, but they search by words, and when they do a search, they get hits that are all topical. They're all words. Never in this process are we telling them that when you search, you're going to come up with this Dewey number, and then you're going to have to figure out what that Dewey number stands for to know what subject you're talking about. So I think kids are I think eliminating the translation of Dewey just makes everyone's life easier, and I think it makes them better users of our library because they understand that process.
It looks like we've got about, I know this went fast, 10 more minutes. We've got another question right now. Did you find that your circulation increased after the change?
Everybody asks that question. I don't think it's increased. It's not really decreased either. But that was never a goal for us. I know when we were reading in 2006, 7, 8, when we started reading about all these big systems that were doing the bisect switch, they were all saying every library you read about, they said they had a 30% increase in circulation. Well, they're big libraries, and maybe they did, and at that time maybe they did. But now, we're finding that our circulation is decreasing because everybody's using ebooks and using other sources for their information, not necessarily checking out a bunch of books. So I think the fact that we're staying consistent and staying about on the same circ level is a positive. But it was never our goal. I mean, that never came up in our decision making that, oh, this is going to increase our circulation. For us, the main thing was we wanted patrons to more easily find their books and not have to feel embarrassed because they don't know where to go to look, and not come to our desk with these words, these numbers written down on a piece of paper saying, I don't know where to find this book. And half the time the number they wrote down was the ISBN number and not the call number. So that was our goal, is to make the user have a better experience. Circulation just really never, even for my board, it never occurred to them to say, oh, is this going to increase our circulation?
Another question or two, sorry.
That's okay.
Did you do a parent or family collection and also separate Newberry, Caldecott, or Hoosier?
We did not still separate Caldecott, Newberry, and Hoosier. And we do have a parenting collection in our adult nonfiction. We have sex ed books in our children's collection. So we've incorporated all those parenting books. I think we even have a parenting section in our kids section too. I don't have that memorized exactly, but I think we do. But we didn't do the Caldecott and that kind of thing. But you could. If that's what's important to you and your patrons, then definitely do that.
Okay. Another one coming through. Has the required training and expertise of your catalogers changed?
No. I mean, they're still cataloging the books the same way they did before. It's just the call number is different. But no, that's not changed at all. Okay. So here's the special collections that we pulled out in our picture books. These are the ones we have right now. It would be very easily to change those up later on if we decided, if princesses aren't important anymore and we want something else becomes important, we could easily switch that out. It's just a matter of putting a new label on the book. We did take a little bit of liberty with the cutter. Sometimes, because we only have a category and 2 subcategories, sometimes even when we were in Dewey, to be honest, we did this, but we would, instead of cuttering by the author's last name, sometimes we would cutter by something else. So in the picture books, we cutter by the character, because all these character books, they're all written by different authors, and you want to keep them together because people want to go to one spot and find all the Barbie books or all the Clifford books or whatever. So we do cutter some in the picture books by character, and these are the characters that we presently are cuttering by, so we keep those books together. We have done the same thing in our adult collection. In animals, we have animals, pets, dogs, and we wanted to keep the dog breeds together, so we cutter by that dog breed instead of the author's last name. So we do make that decision once in a while to use something besides the author's name as the cutter. We've even changed our board books, kids board, author's last name, so everything is spelled out. We have children's music collection. This gave them an opportunity to divide that music collection up a little bit more. I think that they have a music drama now that they've added in. Our audio kits, same thing. And our shelving rule is less like it used to be with Dewey, nothing before something. So as you can see, this whole shelf of books here, kids' food comes before kids' food breakfast, comes before kids' food dairy. So it's just less is first, more is later. One of the things that we didn't plan on, and Kent didn't warn us about this, and it resulted in a big problem. I thought maybe I covered all the bases when we were starting this project, but when we went to do our first weeding after we had changed our books, we realized that the books were not coming out in call number order properly. Because if you think about it, if you have a kid's food breakfast would come before a kid's food Sullivan there on that shelf if you just went strictly alphabetical. And so it was not, the call number sort was not coming out with less is first and more is later. So we called our ILS system and said, how can we make this work? We're not going to be the only library that's going to be changing this up. How can we make this work? And so they told us, and it was something very simple, and we should have thought about it. If we would have just put 2 spaces before the cutter, then everything would have lined up correctly. So I'm warning you now, if you make this change, be sure you do that. We didn't even think about it. So now they're fixing that problem for us because we're not going to go back and do every record again ourselves. But going forward, we just put 2 spaces before the cutter in our call number, and it makes the sort come out properly. Nobody warned us about that. So we have helpful shelf labels, just like we had before. There's the first one there is the adult collection. The second one's the kids. They've done color-coded ones because, like I said, they have more than one category on a shelf all the time. And they put those nice little blue shelf holder marker things in between some of the major categories so kids can find them easily. And then there's a picture of our shelf label for our magazines. And we use that little symbol that's on that magazine label to indicate that we also have it in e-magazine, because that's the symbol we use in our card catalog to represent the e-magazine. We've updated our signage, still use the same signage hanging in our aisles. We've just updated it with the new look and with the category names. Do people like it? People ask me, okay, how's it going? Well, the staff like it. I've had staff members come up to me after the fact and said, I said it was okay when we talked about doing this, but they said I really didn't think I was going to like it. But they said, I want to tell you that I love it. And especially our shelvers, they were afraid. They thought, oh, this is going to be awful. This is going to be so horrible. I won't be able to, we won't be able to show the books right and all this. And they all love it. They get through shelving so much faster. We have the luxury of being able to close our library to the public every fall because we have this big street fair in our town, and they close down the streets, and so we're closed to the public, and we read our shelves as a staff every fall. We go through an entire collection, put the collection in order so we can look for lost and missing books, and usually it takes us 3.5 days. This past fall, it took us a day and not even 2 days. I think it was a day and a half to put all of our books in order. It went so fast. Patrons, we have not heard any awful remarks at all. And I think it's because we kind of talked it through with everybody as they came into the library that first summer. We spent so much time talking about why we were doing it, and how it was going to work, that we really haven't had any negative complaints. We've had a couple older gentlemen who have come into the library, maybe haven't been in for the last year, and what did you do with the Dewey, But when we sat down and talked with them, they understand. I mean, it's nobody's giving us hate notes or anything like that. One patron that was a really avid patron of the library, he came up to me during the process and said, I'm really worried. He says, I think this is kind of cool, but I'm really worried. He says, will I be able to use the card catalog to find my books? And I said, sure. So I took him to the card catalog and showed him that, there's still going to be a call number there. It's just going to be words instead of a number. And you'll still be able to take those words and go to the shelf and find your book. And once I explained that to him, that the card catalog was not going away, he was a happy camper. And librarians, well, I don't know how they feel about it exactly, except that I've gotten lots of words of encouragement from different libraries. Different librarians have come. I've gotten little notes in the mail that said, My husband and I were out over the weekend, and we decided to come take a look at your library because I was dying to see how it looked. And so I've gotten those little notes. We've had lots of libraries come and look at it. They want to see what it looks like. And I think that's important because it wasn't until we looked at it at Kent that it all just kind of made sense to us and became something that we thought we could do. So I think that that's important, that just go take a look for yourself. And we've had a lot of libraries that have done that, and we're very open to that. And like I said, when you start changing things, lots of things change, you know. So we got a lot of benefits from doing this project besides just changing our classification system. We did heavy weeding. We changed location names that we've been wanting to do, but we just thought, oh, it's too big of an undertaking. We did something with our reference collection. You know, we got it, we moved it out and put it in the nonfiction. We did a lot of face front displays with our flippers. We raised our bottom shelf. Since we had to shift all these books anyway, I said, you know, I think we could probably raise that lower shelf a little bit and not put books on the bottom like we used to. And so we raised it up quite a bit. As you can see, that first column, that's how high off the floor we raised our lower shelf while we were doing it. So people love that. We've added new signage, and we added those word clouds, which the patrons love. So we've gained a lot of benefits from this whole project for our library. The cost, people want to know how much did it cost. Well, we did our own conversion. Our catalogers did all the work. We did slow down ordering a little bit that one summer when we first started. We put off ordering, you know, the books that we didn't need right away, but so we did a little bit of that. We also had summer interns that took over desk time for all of our catalogers and technical services staff so they could spend a whole time in tech services doing the work. But other than that, we did it with our own labor. The label and supplies is really the only cost in the signage. We got a good deal on our signage online, so that didn't cost us very much. And the label and supplies, we're past $6,000 now. This was doing all the nonfiction, I think probably cost us about $6,000. But now that we're changing all the books, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more than that, but still a relatively cheap project, I would say. Not at all what I thought originally that might be. And there's my wonderful staff who did it all. And I want to tell you, they all pitched in. You know, everybody had a part in this project. And but I think that was good because everybody had the buy-in, which is very, very important.
Okay, we had a few more questions at the end. Number of catalogers involved in the project.
I have one full-time cataloger and 2 part-time.
Okay.
So 2 full-time equivalents.
And how did you treat biographies?
Our biographies, in our adult collection, we don't have a biography section anymore. We haven't had for a long time. We've incorporated the biographies into the areas that they belong. So that didn't change. We do put a little biography sticker on the spine of our biography books so that people who just want to read biographies can find them easier in the stacks. But we don't have a biography section. Lots of libraries still do. And we've been to libraries where we've looked at it and they just have their classification is biography. And then they subcategorize it by the kind of biography, the sport biography or the history biography or whatever. So if you wanted to do that, you could easily do that. And we do that in our children's collection because children have to read biographies, and so the children's department didn't want to integrate their biographies. They wanted to keep it a special section. So that's what they do.
Also, number of books converted, but you probably also will say all items. How many
all items? We have over 100,000 items in our collection. I think it's 120 maybe thousand items. And when we're done, they'll all be changed. Every label will have changed, I'm sure.
And I had one last question. I wasn't sure. I kind of missed the context. Stephen asked, I have not heard what library is she from. Do you mean Stephanie or do you mean someone else she talked about? It looks like it was just at 11 o'clock.
Wells County Public Library.
let me check, Steve.
Yeah. I put my email address up here on those last slides so that if you want to email me questions or if you want this, that address down at the bottom is a public Dropbox folder where we put all of our material. This presentation, our scope notes, our category brochures, everything that we have is in that Dropbox. And I will be glad to email that to you because it's kind of a long address. I will email it to you if you just email me. I'll send you that, and then you can take a look at our materials.
Okay, well, we really appreciate Stephanie being here. This is a major project that they've gone through. I already put in the chat box that we've recorded the webinar, and we're going to add the presentation to the PowerPoint presentation to the Indiana State Library SlideShare. So I definitely can get those links to you along with your LEUs, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And again, if you have more questions, definitely send it to me or definitely Stephanie, and we'll get you answered. We appreciate you being here. Thanks so much, and thanks to Stephanie.
Thank you.